So what's up guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Angel and today I want to share my birth story. I already did a birth story with my first daughter, but this is my birth story about my second daughter. Okay, so where do I even start? My second daughter's birth actually isn't even really that funny of a story. It's kind of like a sad story, which, you know, my life is literally like a drama. I'm so serious that they should make a Lifetime movie about my life, because the stuff that happens to me on the reg just doesn't seem like real life sometimes. And so this is basically what happened. A week before my daughter was born, my husband's grandpa actually, oh, this is so sad to talk about, you guys. And if family's watching, I'm sorry to bring up something that's really tough and that we're still dealing with. But you know, this is my life. This is the true story. So I'm just gonna keep it real. But the week before my second daughter was born, my husband's grandpa actually passed away. And let me just say how much I loved that man. He passed away a week before she was born, and then the next week we were supposed to have his funeral. So the day of his funeral, I had an appointment scheduled with my midwife to go and get my membrane swept. And if you ever had your membrane swept, it is not fun. It is very, very like one of those things I was kind of stressed out about. But then on top of that, we had to make it to the funeral in time. So I had to call my midwife and explain the situation to them, because my appointment was scheduled for the exact time that the funeral was supposed to start. So I had to call my midwife and be like, hey, this is what happened. Can you please get me in earlier? And thank God they were super understanding, and they got me in first thing in the morning. They literally squeezed me in for this. So I go in and I had my membrane swept. And then right after that appointment, we jumped in the car and went straight to the church for the funeral. And the entire time during the service, I started having like little tiny contractions, but then they kind of just went away. It was like, after you get your membrane swept, it's kind of like you just get really crampy. So I was just kind of cramping a little bit. I guess it wasn't really that bad of anything. And then after the funeral, we went back to my husband's Nana's house and we hung out with family. You know, the things you do after a funeral. We just hung out with family and reminisced. So the entire time though, like the family kept like trying to figure out ways to make my baby come out, because you guys don't even know how big I was at this point. It was like uncomfortably big. It was time for her to come out. Like I couldn't stand being pregnant anymore. It hurt. I was having back pain the entire end of my pregnancy, like sharp pains that would start in my lower back and go straight into my leg. So it was hard for me to move around without holding on to my back. I literally looked like an old woman when I was walking around. The family was like telling me that I needed to get down on all fours and like rock and go for a walk. So we were trying to like induce my labor, and of course nothing was working. And then that night, my husband and I kept staying in a hotel that was close to his Nana's house, but her house was literally like 30 minutes from the hospital. So if I went to labor, her house was the best place to be because I wasn't too far. My house was an hour and like 20 minutes from the hospital. So anyway, it's worth it to have a good doctor though, because our town is so small that the doctors here just weren't good. And I'm like, I'm going to give birth someplace where I know I'm going to be taken care of. So it was worth the drive, trust me. We stayed in a hotel, and the entire night I kept waiting to go into labor and I didn't. But then the next morning I woke up and I started having like contractions that were pretty like intense. They weren't too bad, but they weren't like little ones anymore. But I was just like, oh, maybe something will happen, but it's probably not going to happen today. I kind of lost hope. But as soon as we were about to leave the hotel the next morning, it was like 8:30. I was like, well, let me just go to the bathroom real quick before we leave. So I went to the bathroom, and then I noticed that I was losing my mucus plug. And from my first birth, I know that once I lost that mucus plug, it was like, okay, you're in labor. And so once I lost the mucus plug this time around, I knew that things were about to get serious. So I got excited and I started calling everyone like, oh my God, I lost my my mucus plug. And you know, that's just kind of what you do when you realize you're in labor. Everyone was so excited that I lost my mucus plug. We were close to the hospital, and I called my midwife. I'm like, hey, we are like actually close and we're in town. Should we just stick around and see if things progress, or should we just go home? And then they kind of were like, do what you feel is right. So I mean, we just drove home because I was like, if I'm in labor, I'd rather go home someplace where I'm comfortable in labor and then figure out the hospital situation. And plus, I really wanted to see my daughter before I went into the hospital, because I knew it was going to be like a long time. Like once you get admitted into the hospital, it was gonna be like 3 days that until I got to see her and be home with her. So I'm like, I really want to go home. I want to see my daughter. I want to play with her. I want to spend this last little bit of time with her as an only child. So we went home. I went home and I'm like, okay, well, I know that things are going to progress. So the first thing I did when I got home was I went and I took a little tiny nap. And then after I took my nap, I woke up and I hung out with my daughter for a little bit, and then we went on a walk. And seriously, after that walk we took was probably around like 1 o'clock. And after that walk, everything just started going so fast. I'm not even kidding. That walk was like, all right, you're gonna go in, like it's gonna get serious. And unlike my first daughter, like this time around, I was really aware of my body, if that makes sense. Like I wasn't in pain. Like with my first daughter, I was in like agony. This time it hurt, it was uncomfortable, but I was never like screaming out in pain. I literally would feel contractions coming on, and then I would just be like, okay, everyone be quiet. And I would close my eyes, and then I would just breathe and focus on my breathing and wait for the contraction to end. And then I'd be like, okay, and I'd start talking. So because I wasn't like screaming out in pain, my husband was like not believing that I was in labor. He's like, oh, I don't think it's time to go to the hospital. But my contractions started getting closer together, and I'm like, Aaron, babe, look, my contractions are really close together right now. I think we need to go. And he's like, but you're not in that much pain. And remember last time we went to the hospital, they told you not to come in until you couldn't talk. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't know. I just feel like I need to go to the hospital. So it took me convincing him. Like I literally had to convince him that I was in labor, because he didn't believe it, because I wasn't in any pain. So we called the midwife and we told her what was happening. And I don't think she believed I was in labor either. I'm serious, you guys. I was so calm this second time around. It's ridiculous. Like I was not freaking out like I did the first time. So anyway, we called the midwife, and then she's like, okay, we'll just try to labor a little bit more at home. And she knew the drive we had to take to the hospital, and she was still like, yeah, labor a little bit more at home and maybe take a shower and stuff and see if that helps. And so I literally was kind of getting frustrated, because I'm like, people aren't believing I'm in labor. But then I was texting Aaron's mom and Nana, and they're like, you need to go to the hospital, because it sounds like you're like getting really close to giving birth. So I'm glad I started listening to them. But and my Mima was at the house. She was there to watch my daughter while I gave birth. So my Mima was like, Angel, I really think you need to go. So it's because of my grandmother and Aaron's grandmother and mom that I went to the hospital, because everyone else didn't believe I was in labor. So I was like sitting on the couch, and I took like a final picture with my daughter as an only child, and it was really cute, because she was sitting on my belly and I was like holding her, and then I gave her like a kiss, and we called it, oh, so cute. Anyway, so I took a final picture with my daughter, and I gave her a kiss, and I tucked her into bed, and then I told her that I would see her when her sister was born. And then we left the house, and as we were leaving the house, I felt like my daughter, my new baby, was about to like just come out. And I actually told my husband, I'm like, you need to get a towel or something, because I'm afraid my water's gonna break in your car. And so anyway, then the car ride to the hospital, my contractions seemed to not hurt. Like, I'm serious, you guys, like I was not in that much pain the second time, but they didn't seem to hurt that bad. And I literally kept like psyching myself out, and I kept telling myself, we're gonna get there and they're gonna be like, you're not even at a 1 yet, you need to go home. Because that's how, like, I literally wasn't in pain, but the contractions were like 3 to 2 minutes apart. So they were pretty regular and they were really close together. So, but I just wasn't in that much pain. We get to the hospital after the drive, and I almost just told my husband to go to Starbucks. So I'm like, we might as well waste time, because I feel like I'm not even that far along yet. But then when we got to the hospital, I got a really bad contraction, and I'm like, no, let's just go inside. And so we went inside the hospital, and we go up the elevator to the labor and delivery floor, and then we talked to the lady at the front desk, and the lady like looked at my face, and then she was like, can I help you? And my husband was like, yeah, she's in labor. And then the lady was actually kind of rude and kind of annoyed me, but she was like, that's what everyone thinks. And I literally looked at her like, are you serious? Like, that's not really like professional. The lady didn't believe I was in labor, but they took me back and examined me, and they hooked me up to the monitors, and I'm like having contractions. So every time I have a contraction, I'm just like, and I just kind of put my hand up, I'm like, hold on. And then I have my contraction, and then I start talking to them again. And then I think they thought I was faking it. I'm not even kidding. So then my midwife comes in and she checks me, and I could tell because I was so calm, she was kind of iffy as well. So she's like, okay, well, let's just check you and see how far along you are. So she checks me and she goes, oh, she's already at a 6. And then I like literally like my eyes started watering because I couldn't believe that I was that far along, and I had progressed by myself without the epidural, because the last time I barely made it to a 5 before I had to get the epidural. And so just the fact I made it to a 6 and I still wasn't in pain, and I was like that far along, it made me really emotional. And plus I was pregnant, and all those hormones were just like rushing through my body because I'm about to give birth. So I like kind of started to cry, and I'm like, oh my gosh, are you serious? She's like, yeah, you're doing really good. I'm like, thanks. So anyway, they gave me my room, and they were like, okay, so do you want the epidural? And I'm like, I do want the epidural, but I'm not in that much pain right now. And then they were like, well, you're progressing really, really fast. So if you want the epidural, maybe you should just go ahead and get it. And they were talking about putting me in the tub and stuff, which I was all open for the tub. But just the fact I was progressing so fast, I didn't want to get to the point where I was pushing out a baby without an epidural, because let me tell you, I remembered from the last time how bad the head hurts coming out, and I was on the epidural. So the only reason I got the epidural was because I remembered my daughter's head coming out the first time. And yeah, so I was like, yeah, let's just go ahead and get the epidural. So I got it, and the anesthesiologist, he was like telling me, like, I don't know, the epidural doesn't really hurt me. So he was just telling me that I was like, he told me that I was really, really tough. And I was like, you need to tell my family to get that, because they don't believe I'm tough. I don't know, everyone makes jokes that I'm not tough, but you know, I'm just saying. But yeah, he was like, no, you're really, really tough, because you're not even like moving or anything. You're just kind of taking it. And then he was like, wait, are you having a contraction? I'm like, yeah. And he was like, oh my gosh. He thought I was some kind of beast, apparently. So anyway, I was having a contraction, and the anesthesiologist was giving me the epidural at the same time. I'm just saying. So then he gives me my epidural, and I pressed the little button, because they give you like this little button you can press every 15 minutes, and it gives you the medicine. And I felt a lot of pressure in my bottom, and that's like one of the signs that you are ready to push your baby out. And that was after he gave me the epidural. So I kept telling my midwife, and then she's like, okay, let's give it like 30 minutes, see if the epidural kicks in. And then 30 minutes later, I was still feeling that pressure, and she checked me, and I was already at an 8. And it only takes the anesthesiologist an hour maybe to get to you. So I went from a 6 to an 8 within an hour. And let me just throw this in there. My water still didn't break. So my midwife was like, okay, let's do this. Let's try to get a little bit of sleep, and then we'll come back in an hour and see how far along you are. So of course I tried to sleep, but I couldn't, because I just had all that pressure. And so at one point I rang my nurse on the little bed or whatever, and I told her that I was having a lot of pressure. And so my midwife came back in, and then she checked me, and she said she needed to break my water, because if it kept going any further, it was literally just gonna like pop everywhere, which is disgusting, but that's what she said. So she broke my water, and then I was at a 9. So It did not take me long after being admitted into the hospital to start pushing. I can't remember when I started pushing, to be honest with you, but I actually, before I started pushing, started to shake. Like, I was physically shaking because I had so much anxiety about my baby's head coming out. And my midwife had to calm me down. She was like, just remember how different this birth has been compared to your other birth. She really had to talk me down because I had so much anxiety that I couldn't push. I literally was shaking and I couldn't push because I was so scared. Oh, and then also in the midst of me having a baby and in the midst of all the drama with like all the family stuff we had going on, my husband also caught the cold of the century. And so while I am pushing this baby out, my husband, in between my pushes, is having to go into the bathroom and blow his nose. And he's like sniffling and coughing the entire time that I'm pushing this baby out. So yes, it was an experience. Let me just say that. So anyway, every time I took a break, he went and blew his nose. This is my life, you guys. You can't make this stuff up. You just can't. I just kept pushing, and I did like, I only had to push for like 30 minutes, or maybe it was 20 minutes. It was like between 20 or 30 minutes that I was pushing. And that's a record for me because the last time I had a baby, I had to push for 2 hours. Once I gave birth, then it was just like the best feeling in the world. Like, I can't even describe to you how amazing it feels after you do all this work and then you have your baby. Like, you just can't even imagine until you're a mom. First thing we did when she was born was we did skin to skin, and I started breastfeeding her. But because she had low blood sugar, they had to give her a little bit of formula to kind of like boost it up because she was getting really cold or something. I can't remember. It's really hazy. And then they had to take her to the nursery to monitor her all night. So for the first like few hours of her life, she was actually not with me, which stressed me out. I couldn't even really sleep. I got like maybe 2 hours of sleep, and then I woke up to go see her in the nursery. And then even after I visited her, I couldn't even hold her. So it was really stressing me out when I couldn't have my baby with me. You carry this little person in your body and you're used to having them with you all the time, and then when they come out and you can't physically have them, it is very stressful for a new mom. I don't know how to explain it. I can't imagine what people go through when their babies are in the NICU. I can't even imagine. Like, that would be like, I don't, like, my baby was just in the nursery and I was freaking out. Finally, around like 8 o'clock in the morning the next day, so she was born at like 2, and then at 8 o'clock, so how many hours is that? 6 hours later, I finally got to have her in the room with me, and I didn't let her go. I just held her all the time. Later in the day, like around lunchtime, my family came to visit, and it was just a really precious moment, especially because we had just lost someone in our family. So to have a new life, it was just amazing. Like, it was definitely like there was a dark spot, but then we had like something positive happen right after that. And I don't know, it really was a special moment for our whole family. So her birth is very, very special to us. And then on top of that, she is my rainbow baby. So there's that also, because I had an early miscarriage, and then I got pregnant with her. So she's just a very special baby. Like, she is my miracle baby, and I love her so much. You guys you don't understand. Like, you just don't understand how much I love my children. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe, and please and please leave a nice comment down below. So love you guys.